And
Wyrd Realities explores the paranormal, preternatural, and supernatural worlds that surround us. Here we delve into those topics that challenge us to think outside the limitations of realism, where we test the boundaries of imagination and are forced to think outside the confines and restrictions of what is normal. We are the creators, the writers, the artists, and the insane. Welcome to our Wyrd Realities.
good evening, everyone. As you can tell by that background music, Hogan's Heroes. Tonight, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Tonight, we're talking about the fascinating, kind of perverted, and yet still unsolved mystery surrounding the death of Bob Crane of Hogan's Heroes fame. Tonight, my guests are Finley Jones and Bethany Stutzman. So before we begin, you know the procedure. Like the show, please hit subscribe. Share this with your friends. This is going to be a really fascinating show tonight. I did a lot of research on this because I was a huge Hogan's Heroes fan. And this is one of the most, I'm sure everybody knows Bob Crane was murdered in his sleep. And I'm sure almost everybody here knows that Bob Crane was a major pervert. On the evening of June 29th, 1978, Bob Crane was found murdered in his apartment in, oh God, I didn't take the notes on this.
Scottsdale.
Scottsdale. I should have remembered that with my name.
Arizona rep.
He was found murdered in Scottsdale. A young actress was coming over. He had agreed to tutor her, maybe more than tutoring. He had agreed to tutor her. The door was left open, and when she went in, she found a body in bed with its head bludgeoned. She reported it to the police, and it turned out that it was Bob Crane. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of good stories. I'll post some links, but very short history. Bob Crane started as a very dynamic radio host. He was a DJ in New York, in Connecticut, I'm sorry. And very outgoing, very personable. And he was able to get a lot of big names on his show, like Marilyn Monroe. And New York was starting to get a little bit, concerned because nobody was listening to the New York DJs. They were listening to Bob. Very long story short, Bob went out to Hollywood where he became a DJ. He was so popular and he was so good looking that he made a couple of appearances on the Dick Van Dyke Show, became a regular co-star on Donna Reed. And in the late 60s, he got his own sitcom, Hogan, Colonel Bob Hogan of Hogan's Heroes. And the rest was history. Show lasted several seasons, was quite popular. After the show ended, he ran into the cycle that a lot of TV actors did. They couldn't find work. They were typecast as one thing. He did some talk shows. He did a few, appeared on a few TV shows, wound up on The Love Boat. Who didn't wind up on The Love Boat? But the big, deep, dark secret that nobody knew throughout all of this, well, the public didn't know. I mean, in Hollywood, everything is known, was that Bob Crane was he had a sexual addiction. Bob Crane was married to his first wife. I didn't take a lot of notes on this because I didn't honestly. I was asked to host at the last minute. But Bob Crane's first wife, he married, had 3 kids with her. And even while seeing them, he was having this affair. He loved photography. He used to make he used to take photos of all the young women. And, there was nothing forced about this. It was all consensual. They, most of these women just loved being photographed naked with a great star. Well, then late 60s, he met John Carpenter, not to be confused with John Carpenter, the director of Halloween. This is another guy. He was a video equipment salesman. Now, remember, back in the 1960s, video equipment was huge. It was bulky. No one had it. TV, even some TV studios and news studios didn't have it. But Bob had the money. He was an avid photographer. Him and John Carpenter became good friends. And then they eventually turned their love for photography and videography into filming private pornographic movies. For years, they did this. It was a thing. John Carpenter and Bob Crane they'd go to nightclubs. Bob Crane was the good-looking star. He attracted the woman. Bob took the ones he liked back to his apartment in Scottsdale. John Carpenter got the sloppy seconds, but they had a great time. And John would videotape Bob Crane having sex. This went on. Excuse me. This went on for years until one day, and I promise I will not die. On June 29th, 1978, Bob Crane was found dead in his house. He'd been bludgeoned to death. In his sleep, there was no signs of violence in the house. There was no signs of forced entry, even though Bob Crane left the door locked all the time. And he had been hit on the back of the head with one of the tripods that had been used to videotape the porno scenes. The tripod went missing. And ironically, there was a cut cord from one of the video cameras tied around his neck. It was not used for strangulation. There were no marks on his neck to prove that, there was anything. It was just there, which baffled the police. And ever since then, it has been a mysterious case. Before I jump in and let the ladies comment, I just want to say to everybody, hello, Mike, Alan, Wyrd Realities, whoever's, I don't know who's talking Wyrd Realities, but Londa, it's good to see you. Sylvester, let's see, Alan, Sylvester, and Wyrd Realities. So, welcome you all. Anybody who comes in later, if I don't catch you, please please forgive me, but enjoy this, enjoy the show. So, ladies, what do you think of the case? Before I go rambling off on all of the official parts of it.
Finley, go ahead and go.
I mentioned to the girls earlier that I loved this case because as a kid, I was a huge Hogan's Hero fan. I thought Bob Crane was my idol. He was cool. He was smart ass. He was good looking. Hogan's Heroes was one of the reasons I got into history. So this whole case fascinated me. I'm sorry, ladies.
Go ahead, Bethany.
Oh, I don't know. We'll get more into the blood and stuff later, but I still think John did it. Like, it's either him or like a scorned woman, which is very possible too. So, I mean, there's a reason why it's still a mystery because no one has all the answers. But yeah, I'm still going with John.
Mm-hmm. Finley?
Well, and I was telling Scott earlier, I didn't have the opportunity to research as much as I should have on John Carpenter, but it sounds like he's the most viable suspect. But I agree with Sylvester. He made the comment that consent is debatable when it comes to that time period, and I made that something similar. Said something similar earlier, that it was. I wondered if it would have been such a big deal had it happened 10 or 20 years later, before the whole Me Too movement. Obviously, taken into account, like Scott mentioned, that none of the women seemed to care that they were shown in sex videos with the famous actor. So it didn't seem that he forced anybody to do it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And I think one of the things was, this was before social media. So the only one who was going to see the sex video, it's not like he could upload it to Pornhub.
Right.
The only people who were going to see the videotape was John Carpenter and Bob Crane. Unfortunately, the whole investigation was botched. The Scottsdale police, no shame on them, had never dealt with a murder before, especially one of this caliber. When the young woman, I can't remember her name, the actress who had gone over to see Bob Crane and found the door open, because it was 104 degrees out that day, they interviewed her in the apartment. And she was answering the phone and she was touching things. So immediately the crime scene was dirty.
I think her name was Victoria.
Yeah, Victoria something. I don't want to go off and look it up. They found it. What they found was nothing was disturbed in the apartment. But one of the tripods, there were two tripods that were in the apartment from earlier photographs. One that was used for the video camera, one that was used for the still camera. The video camera tripod was gone. No one ever found that. And even though nothing had been ransacked, one photo album was missing. So they don't know what was in the photo album. They don't know, whose pictures were in it, but it was gone. The police ruled out a jealous woman or an angry boyfriend, husband, or lover, because there was no ransacking of the apartment. There was no sign of a struggle. Bob Crane was asleep, and he was in his underwear. And as a lot of people pointed out, Bob slept naked. So, Bob was laying in bed in his underwear when somebody came in, somebody he must have known, because Bob always kept that apartment locked, afraid that if anybody broke in and stole the stuff, it could ruin his reputation. So somebody had come in, somebody had the key, got in. Bob felt comfortable enough to leave them there and, dress in underwear. And the one thing that was stolen, the photo album, that person must have known exactly where it was. So now, as you ladies and as Sylvester are saying, the police immediately focused in on John. And there was a ton of circumstantial evidence. John was in town that night. He was staying. Bob used to let him stay in the apartment. This night, Bob didn't. Bob made him stay in a hotel across the street. And there's a lot of speculation. Some people said that Bob Crane was trying to get his life in order, and he was getting rid of people who were obnoxious and taking advantage of him. And John was one of those people, because Bob Crane could pick up women without John. John was tagging along just to get the sloppy seconds. So they thought that, and Bob was sleeping in his underwear, which he wouldn't have done unless there was somebody he knew, non-female, in the apartment. Bob Crane was supposedly going to drive him to the airport at 4 a.m. Instead, John Carpenter rented a car, drove himself to the airport. And then when he got back to where he was going, he called Bob Crane's son, Bob Crane Jr., from his first marriage to tell him he was back. And Bob Crane Jr. told the police, there's something unusual about that. He never calls unless it's like, oh, I got to pass you a message from your father. So the police immediately thought, he's creating an alibi. So they went, they found the rental car, they examined it, and sure enough, they found blood and they found a little bit of brain tissue in the car. So immediately they thought, okay, John Carpenter had done this. That there was some reason that maybe John Carpenter was, maybe Bob had told him, look, this is it. We're going to end our friendship. The movie Autofocus implies incorrectly that John Carpenter might have been bisexual and had a crush on Bob Crane. And that when Bob was telling him, no, our friendship is over, he did it in a jealous fit. Other people think that John might have done it because the gravy train was coming to an end. Anyways, the police did an investigation, and they also looked at Bob Crane's second wife. Don't remember her name, but she played Hilda, the Klink's secretary in the last few seasons. They were married and they were going through a horrible divorce. And accordingly, when Bob Crane divorced his first wife, he cut her and the kids out completely. And there was talk that Bob Crane was going to cut his second wife out. So the police thought, if it's not John, it's his wife. She killed him before the will could be changed to get the money. The problem was she was in Washington, D.C. that night, so there was no way she could have done it unless she hired a contract killer, and there was no evidence. So all eyes pointed on Carpenter. And they did a blood test on the blood samples in the car. Then there was no DNA back then, but the blood samples matched Bob Crane's. So there was I'm sorry, that was the 94 case. There was nothing to prove John did it. Alan, we had no reason to kill off Bob Crane, at least that I can talk about. So the case went idle for years. No one ever found the album, the missing photo album, and nobody ever found the murder weapon, the tripod. In the early 1990s, they were able to, all of the stuff was kept. I read somewhere where the cops were disgusted because they had to go through every photo album, every videotape to try to find some evidence, some clue, some woman that was upset or that, so they could investigate, and they came up with nothing. In 1994, they did a blood test. They did a sample of the blood found in the car. It had been preserved, and the blood type matched Bob Crane's, but it was blood type. It could have been anybody with the blood type. The DNA, the prosecutor thought he had enough evidence, the DA, and they put John Carpenter on trial. Carpenter was acquitted. And I'm going to post a couple of links at the end of this. There is a very good interview on a murder podcast with one of the authors of the latest Bob Crane book. And he said he talked to one of the jurors, and the juror said, we all knew John Carpenter did it. We were convinced, but there was no solid evidence. Nothing, there was always that shadow of a doubt. In 2015, this author got permission from the family and from the Scottsdale police to use the last of the blood available to do a DNA test. And this was going to be the absolute. The DNA test was going to prove it was Bob Crane. If that was the case, Carpenter was the murderer. His book was even saying case closed. That was the original title. They did a live show in which the scientists came out, and the scientists said on live television, the DNA did not match Bob Crane. So any case against John Carpenter fell apart. And to this day, no one knows who did. Everybody thinks it was Carpenter. Carpenter passed away in the early 2000s. He never admitted it, never said anything. It's one of those cases, unless somebody finds that missing photo album in somebody's house or somebody makes a deathbed confession, I don't think this murder is ever going to be really solved.
So I have a question.
Yes.
This brain matter.
Uh-huh.
Or brain tissue.
Yes.
What exactly, was it, where do you just get brain tissue?
I don't know.
You can't just get brain, it had to come from somewhere.
Exactly.
A dead man whose brain was bashed in.
And that's what convinced the police it was Carpenter. Because, the car Carpenter rented that night had blood and a little bit of brain matter in it. Bob Crane was hit in the back of the head and burst his skull. But it never came to pass. The DNA said it wasn't Bob Crane. And like the author points out, they've used all the blood samples. All of the material that the police had gathered in Scottsdale is now gone. Now, Alan, do you think the mafia might have been involved? There is a story. It is hearsay. No one has ever proven or disproven it. That because Bob's career was going nowhere, he was on the Love Boat. That was the biggest thing he'd done in years. There was talk that he had been in discussions with some mafia leaders to become a porn actor, an official porn actor in distributed movies. And during the negotiations, he backed out and saying, no, he didn't want to do that. It would be an embarrassment to his families. And that the mob got pissed at him for doing that and bumped him. It's a rumor. No one's ever heard of it. But the other indications were the fact that he was killed in his sleep and had let somebody in the apartment he knew. The police tended not to think it was a mob hit. It didn't have the style of murder that the mob is usually associated with. Now, hey, Mike. Yeah, Mike said the DNA could be contaminated. And, it was almost 20, it was more than 25 years after the sample was taken. And so much was wrong with the original gathering of the evidence. It is completely possible that it was contaminated, but it's one of those things. It's a court of law. And even if they'd found to be Bob Crane's, Carpenter, I think, was dead by then. It just would have solved the case, but nothing would have happened. So
his son's still alive, and he still remembers, all of it. It has to haunt him, so it would give him closure.
It would. The son is still convinced it wasn't John Carpenter. He swears it was the second wife.
Really?
Yes, because his first wife, and he was a loving father, a loving husband. He just, when he wasn't at home, was a complete sexual pervert and addict. But when he divorced his first wife, and the divorce came about because, she just got fed up with all the shenanigans, he cut them completely from the will and cut all contact with them. Bob Crane Jr. swears that it was the second wife because they were going through the divorce and she was afraid she would lose all the money. Now, again, she was in Washington, D.C. the night of the murder. So they ruled her out as the murderer. There was no proof that it was a contract killer. And if it was, it would have had to have been somebody who knew Bob Crane for him to let them into the apartment. And Bob Crane wasn't that rich. I mean, granted, in 1978, it's a lot of money. He was only worth $100,000 the day he died. All of his assets. It's not like, like a Johnny Depp or somebody like that who's worth millions.
So John Carpenter, you said he was in a hotel across the street?
Yes, he was like about a 6-minute walk away. You could see, from what I was reading, John Carpenter could see Crane's apartment complex from his hotel room.
Did Bob make a big deal about always locking his doors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was something everybody said. Now, he did give keys to people that he liked, people that he trusted. John Carpenter would definitely have been one of those.
So what, just like a new theory.
Yeah.
Just listening to what you were saying and then reading some articles and stuff too. So there was an article that came out and they're talking about in 2016 that a Phoenix TV reporter, John Hook, convinced the county DA to reopen to get some of the old blood samples and have them tested again. And what they said that came back was that, let's see, the testing only revealed the presence of a previously unidentified male. So that shows that there is a male present in his house that wasn't identified. Obviously, they probably took samples from the people who were there, hopefully working the case, and people who, John and all that. So what if maybe it was like a jealous boyfriend or ex-husband or something, and maybe that's why one of the albums was taken, because it had like photos of the girl in there.
And the Scottsdale police did look into that. And they ruled it out because now you can make the judgment whether the Scottsdale police were wrong or whether it was a valid argument. If it was a jealous husband, boyfriend, whatever, Bob Crane probably wouldn't have let him into the apartment. And if he did, he wouldn't have gone to bed and let the guy sit in the other room so he could sneak in when Bob was asleep and kill him. There was no sign of a struggle.
That's true.
Everything said that Bob was. Now, he could have broken into the apartment, but the other thing that the police said was the album was gone, but there was no sign that the house was ransacked. That things were moved, that somebody was putting in videotapes, that somebody was going through albums. That's why they ruled that out. They thought that the album was gone. It was somebody who knew what was in the album and where the album was, which again goes back to John Carpenter.
Well, what if it was the girl who he let in and then she let her guy in later?
Let's see.
I'm sure girls might have come back for, more. Or if she was one of the people that he gave the key to.
The woman who showed up that morning did not have a key. She showed up and she told the police the door was unlocked, which immediately set off alarm bells because Bob Crane never left his apartment unlocked. She went in, nothing looked disturbed, and when she went into the bedroom, she saw the body laying there. She didn't know it was Bob Crane. The head had been bashed so bad she couldn't tell, and he was laying face down. So she ran out and called the police. It is very possible that he gave the key to someone, and that person came in, some young lady maybe, who was like, oh my God, this will embarrass me. you know, it would make sense. He was there with her. He let her stay. When he fell asleep, she killed him, took the photo album, and ran. The one thing that bothered the Scottsdale police, and a lot of people said another reason why they thought it was Carpenter, of all the things she killed him with, or whoever killed him, the one thing that was used to kill him was the tripod stand from the videos. And
the random cord.
And the random cord that was cut off and wrapped around his neck. It had nothing to do with the murder.
Kind of like a big screw you from the guy that sold him all the equipment.
Exactly. And that's why the police, you know, when they ruled the second wife out as a possibility, they focused in on John. But they could never find enough evidence to bring a court case back then. And yes, Londa, you're right. I mean, whoever left forgot to lock the door. One thing that I've never read is the cops never tried to track down who had keys to the apartment. They knew one person did, John Carpenter, but they never seemed to try to find if like several of the young ladies had keys. And as far as I know, nobody ever came forward to say, oh, you know, he gave me a key. You know.
Well, yeah, that would.
Yeah, that would put it on you.
By the way, I have this cool tripod here too.
Yeah, don't mind the blood. Yeah, Londa, the random cord was weird. That just floored the Scottsdale police. And like I said earlier, it's not that the Scottsdale police were horrible at their job. This was the first murder they had ever dealt with. You know, I mean, they didn't even get like, you know, most of their cases were, you know, maybe some a barroom fight. Somebody got mugged in the street, drunk driving. They'd never had a murder, especially one of this caliber. Ooh, I like what Mike said.
That's another podcast.
Yeah. So I just find it fascinating. I think everybody believes John Carpenter did it, but nobody can prove it. I mean, even the juror, like I said earlier, even the jurors told the guy who wrote the book in 2015, we were convinced he did it. But shadow of a doubt, they couldn't prove it. The key evidence said Carpenter didn't do it, so they had to acquit him. I don't know where the video camera is. The video camera was at the scene of the crime. It was the tripod that was missing. There were two tripods. There was the one for the still camera, the photographic camera, and there was the one for the video camera. I think it was the video camera one that was missing, which again, John Carpenter.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that would explain how the brain matter got in his car, but without the actual murder weapon, and then they couldn't determine what exactly was the murder weapon. That was just, like you said, all circumstantial. So
yeah. And the podcast that I'm going to post up, the guy said that on the way from Scottsdale to the airport, there was like an Indian reservation. And it was just wide open territory. Anybody could have stopped the car at 4 a.m, ran out, threw the tripod, threw everything down, covered it all up, and then taken off.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm sorry, what year was this again?
He was killed in 1978.
Okay.
The trial against him was held in 1994. That was when he was acquitted. And then in 2015 is when they did the DNA sample and had the live TV show.
Okay, because Scottsdale's it's a very kind of high-end place in Phoenix. Like it's
yeah.
So that's what I was trying to figure out if like in maybe 1978, if it still was or what. But it's just a suburb of Phoenix too, which Phoenix is very big, but Scottsdale I don't think was as heavily populated at that time.
No, according to the podcast and that I saw. Plus, there was like one place that showed photographs from the area, and the area, like the nightclubs he visited, And apparently a few years ago, Bob Crane's apartment where he was killed, his condo was up for sale.
Yeah, they turned it into condos.
Yeah, $180,000. You think it would go for a lot more than that. A video camera cord was around his neck, right? And they didn't. Well, I don't know if they checked for prints or not. The problem would have been the key suspect would have had his prints all over the camera anyways. So you really couldn't use that as definitive proof.
I feel like John, okay, yes, it's very likely that John probably did it. But also he's very easy to frame because in some of the stuff that you read, they're like, they were seen having a fight at a nightclub hours before he died.
Yeah.
People were saying that Bob was trying to clear people out of his life. He was like, I'm going to divorce Patty. I'm going to dump John, And then like 2 days later, he died.
Yeah.
So he's very easy to frame also just being across the street, knowing that he had the access and people knew he had the access. And then obviously taking the missing weapon, and you can just, if he didn't lock his car or it was a rental vehicle, they could probably jimmy it open pretty easily. Just plant it there. And then John probably saw it, panicked, and tossed it because he knew they were going to look at him. But I'm still kind of coming back to it might be a scorned woman or a man with her, because it's like Sylvester said, yes, consent is very debatable about back then. Yes, the video cameras, it's not like you're going to upload to social media with it because they didn't have that, but he was known to have Polaroids in his dressing rooms.
Yes.
And he would show people, like even when he was on doing the Disney movie, like
Right.
he got in trouble with the executives because he was showing photos like, oh, this is Tiffany from Florida. Like women were probably not, yes, they wanted to be with him for his statue, but they may not have wanted their photos thrown around or something. So
and
the dude just has a lot of enemies.
And it does make sense. I mean, if it was, I kind of rule out the angry husband or boyfriend because the place wasn't ransacked. Yeah. I would tend more towards the a jilted girlfriend or somebody who's trying to cover her tracks because she might know exactly where the photo album was. So the car detailing. Yes, that was really suspect. And you think he's Prince?
And you would think his prince would be on.
Oh, his prince. Oh. I'm thinking, what does Prince have to do with this?
It threw me back to the seance comment. I'm like, wait, what?
I mean, I never read that if any other prints were found on any of these items. John's would have been all over them. If there were other prints, it would have been hard to prove who they were because there was no other suspects other than his wife, but she had a clear alibi. Any other prints on there would more than likely have been, even if it was the print of the murderer, they had no clue who the murderer was. It's not like they could say, oh, we think it's suspect 3. Let's take his prints and compare them. So, no, I think it's one of those cases. This is going to be unsolved unless somebody comes out, unless they find John Carpenter's diary, or, somebody passes, some young starlet from the, well, it doesn't even have to be a starlet. Some young woman from the 60s and 70s passes away and they find that photo album upstairs in her attic. Don't worry, Mike. My autocorrect. My friends are always telling me, what the hell did you just say?
I think we all have autocorrect stories.
Oh my God. So you guys out there, what do you think? I know Sylvester swears it's Carpenter, and that's who I lean towards. I think Londa said it might have been the mafia. What do you guys think?
So was Carpenter married? did he have a girlfriend? Was he in any type of relationship?
I don't know that. None of what I read or watched actually went in much to Carpenter other than his relationship. That he was the salesman, that him and Bob Crane got along, and they had a really good, close friendship. They'd go out all the time. They'd go clubbing. They would, they'd go, they'd pick up the women, bring them back to Bob's place. And, while Bob was filming himself with one girl, Carpenter would be in the other room with another.
These guys.
Mike, you're sick and I love it. They asked Schultz if he knew anything, and he said, "I know nothing."
Oh my gosh.
Oh my. I just
kill him.
You hear all of this about Bob Crane and then his son, and then you have all this circumstantial evidence, but you don't hear anything about anybody from John Carpenter's family. They don't say anything. Nobody comes forward.
Yeah,
I haven't seen a single thing from any of them. Just makes me wonder what relationships he had.
And the two main, the podcast and the documentary I watched doesn't mention anything about John Carpenter's life outside of the Bob Crane universe.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if it was my family member that was accused of this and I knew better, I would be screaming from the rafters, but nobody came out in his defense.
No.
Maybe because they knew.
Maybe.
They knew his dirty little secrets.
Or maybe they just were, it's like, we don't want to talk about John and his videos.
He's the uncle no one talks about. He's never invited over for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Now he'd like have an OnlyFans page. There is a book. I've not read it. And if I might, that bookcase right there, that's my to be read list. And that doesn't include Kindle. If I didn't have so much to read, I would get this new book that came out around 2015, 2016, because apparently he goes into a lot of details. He talks a lot about John Carpenter. He's convinced, the author is convinced it was Carpenter.
And who was it? Did you say the book name?
Hang on a moment. I'm going to put links to all this stuff.
Okay.
Let's see.
I'll look at the links.
It's John Hook. Oh no, that's the name of it's Who Killed Bob Crane. And off the top of my head, I can't see the author's name.
I'll find it.
Yeah. Who Killed Bob Crane. I'm going to post the link to this podcast.
Yeah, by John Hook.
Yeah. Oh, John Hook is the author?
Yeah, Who Killed the Star of Hogan's Heroes, The Murder of Bob Crane.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. Who Killed Bob Crane, The Final Close-Up, book by John Hook.
Yeah,
author.
And he says on it that the reason he said the final look is because all of the evidence, all of the DNA, the blood has all been used up by now. So even if they came out with a surefire way 5 years from now, it would never happen. Let me see if I can also get that.
And I guess the DNA results from the blood and brain matter they've already tested couldn't be compared to like his son or anything to see if there were matching points.
I think. Wait a minute.
Did John Carpenter have a son?
Not Carpenter. I'm sorry.
Oh, Bob Crane. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. Crane.
Mm-hmm.
And hang on. I'm also adding the show where they talk about the DNA, where they did the live show and it didn't come out. I think that they probably got Bob Crane Jr.'s, they might have done it through him too, but the samples they had did not match Bob Crane. And that was the key point. It was that blood, and that if it was still available, the piece of brain matter did not match Bob Crane. So technically that exonerated Carpenter.
So whose brain matter was it? How is it random brain matter in somebody's rental car?
Yeah.
But could once again also be easy to plant too.
Yeah.
I like Alan's comment right before you started posting all the podcasts.
Mm.
He's got a good little theory right there too.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I missed that. Sorry, Alan.
Oh.
Everyone's looking at the second wife. First wife is just sitting back.
The only problem with that theory, and I'm not ruling it out, what would be her motive?
Pettiness. What?
Possible. Possible.
Didn't you say that he completely cut them out of?
But that was years. That was years before.
But what better way to cover up your suspicion?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it could have also been Bob Crane Jr.
Oh, dang!
Look at you with your little CIA theory,
right?
He's still convinced it was the second wife, even though none of the evidence points to her. The only way she could have done it was by hiring a hitman, and there's nothing that indicates that happened. I always thought, well, of course he thinks it's the second wife. Bob Crane dumped the first wife, the first set of kids, ignored them, cut them out of the will for the second wife. He's got a vengeful streak in him. So naturally, he's going to keep on saying, oh, it's her, it's her. But you never know. He could have done it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But then also, I can see trying to keep it going to keep you out from suspicion. But when there's no suspicion in the first place, then it's kind of weird that he keeps trying to bring it up.
Yeah. Let me see if I can also find that. I'm trying to find one of the things I looked at the other day.
Let's see. I'm just going to Google who killed Bob Crane and see what comes up. Oh, John Henry Carpenter is the first name that comes up.
Wow.
I got the death of Rasputin. If anybody has Netflix, the Last Tsar that just recently aired is a phenomenal show. Let's see, here we are.
The Last Tsar?
The Last Tsar. It's a movie and a documentary about the death of Nicholas II and his children, the rise of communism. And oh my God, it was so great. The scenes with Ben Carpenter plays Rasputin. All right, let me see.
Okay. I see it.
Oh, if I find it, I will post it at the end of the show. But I've got so many Bob Crane things on here. I can't find the one I was looking for.
So, Scott, who do you think did it?
I'm leaning towards Carpenter.
Yeah.
I mean, all the circumstantial evidence, above everything else, why would there be blood and brain matter in Carpenter's car? Now, they did not find the car for several days.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible that somebody else rented the car, killed somebody. There was blood and brain tissue in the car, but when the police finally found the car and looked at it, they said, "Oh, it's John Carpenter. He killed Bob Crane." What are the odds? I think it's John. I would be surprised if it was anyone else. I would I would give 98% odds Carpenter did it.
You see Alan's question?
1 second. What do you think about
The mafia.
Oh.
Yeah.
New angle on the mafia.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, while I don't necessarily rule that out, I can't see the mafia waiting while he was asleep, hitting him on the head, for sleeping with a mafia girlfriend. I mean, I could see, them coming in and finding parts of Bob missing. Maybe him floating off the coast in a 55-gallon drum.
Yeah. Well, definitely a fun mystery. Well, for us, not for Bob.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, Bob.
And there was I was reading somewhere where, everybody's saying, oh my God, this was so unusual. And the person pointed out, no, look at the celebrities. Hollywood is rife with these perversions. And they were pointing out there was Fatty Arbuckle in the 1930s who murdered a young woman, that he was sleeping with. She was 18 or 19, destroyed he was the biggest comedic name back then. There were 2 women that were sexually involved with a movie producer that died. Their careers were over. Though it's not as bad, Pee Wee Herman and his movie theater. You've got, sorry, Bill Cosby, Kevin Spacey. It's not that unusual. But back then, this was the era of, Rob and Laura Petrie and, the Donna Reed show. That stuff never happened. Married couples didn't even sleep in the same bed.
Right.
All right, Londa, I'm glad you enjoyed the show. Take it easy. So we're getting close to the end. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Either in the audience or you ladies?
No.
It sounds to me like it was Carpenter, and the fact that none of his relatives have done anything to stand up for him or speak out for him, even after his death, and while all these podcasts and books and everything are being written that clearly believe that he did it.
Yeah.
It just makes me think that he's probably the one.
Maybe. I always hope that someday they will find that photo album. And I mean, maybe, you never know. Maybe it was a photo album of John and Bob together. Maybe they decided one night, hey, let's give it a shot and see what happens. But Sylvester, I don't know what the next murder mystery is going to be. There's a lot out there I would love to do that. If we already haven't done it, the Black Dahlia murder. That was fascinating. And Alan, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's true. That was something I always wondered. Where did they go to the bathroom in Star Trek and Lost in Space? You never saw any of that.
They had bathrooms in Star Trek in their rooms.
Yeah, but you never really got to see them. But in Lost in Space, they had these little cabins with nothing but a bed and a sliding door.
Oh gosh, you saw a lot of bathtubs in Star Trek, though.
Yeah.
They're very clean.
And I'm sure Kirk was in a lot of them with green.
Oh, see, I'm all thinking Riker.
Oh, yeah.
That's the ones we watch.
Yes, I like those shows. Yeah, Riker was a pervert. There's a Facebook page I follow Riker's Beard, which is nothing. Nothing but bad. That's where I get a lot of the bad puns. If you see a bad pun with Riker in it, except even the ones with Picard telling a joke and Riker going like that. That's where I get.
That's what we need to do. We need to do a Star Trek show.
Oh, we could.
That would be fun.
Because I don't think there's any really controversy around the Star Trek, except the fact that Voyager sucked. That they ended Enterprise the worst way possible.
Just for the fun.
I know.
Controversy.
I know.
Mhm.
Yes, I block that character. We get that guy all the time. The minute I see it, I block him. So, all right. So, ladies, what are you up to for writing, whatever?
Go ahead, Finley.
I am just available to help where I can.
Okay. All right. What? Any good plans for Thanksgiving?
Going to Nashville. I'm going to visit my family and eat a lot of food and watch some football.
And take a big nap afterwards.
Yes, I am. A very big nap.
And Bethany.
Mike, Trekkies all the way. I don't have too much going on. I just started with the Wyrd Realities. So this is my first podcast with this group. So I'm excited about it.
Really? I did not know that.
No, this is my very first one with y'all.
Congratulations. You're going to do well here.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my own podcast started with Wyrd Realities. So we're still kind of talking about that, trying to figure out what route we want to go. And then I'm just working. I work a lot. Black Friday is coming up. So that's my Thanksgiving plans.
Oh.
I got to work Black Friday.
Good luck.
Yep.
My wife cooks Thanksgiving dinner for the family, so she'll be cooking Wednesday and Thursday, and I'll be cleaning up for 5 hours Thursday night. And this weekend, though, in Boxborough, Massachusetts, if anybody's in the area, I'll be attending the New England Comic-Con and Collectibles Extravaganza.
Oh, nice.
I'll be there with all my books, and I'll probably be spending all the money I make on books buying collectibles that I don't need for my study. All right. Well, again, thank you, ladies, for being here tonight. And everybody who tuned in. I hope you all had a good time. Subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get 200. I think we're only a few people short from reaching the 200 mark. And hit like for the show. Again, thank you all. It was a pleasure, and we'll talk to you soon. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.